Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Oikein hyvää iltapäivää Turku ja Turussa vierailevat. This session will be mainly in English. It's all about participatory democracy in Europe and also one of the main tools how to participate in European decision making and how to make a better Europe. We will today discuss also about the tools and practices and experiences here in Finland and also especially also the future of participatory democracy. So I hope the sunshine will continue and also there's some wind for us, but it will make us feel even nicer today, this afternoon. So my name is Lauri Tuomi. I'm the moderator for this afternoon. I come from Finnish Lifelong Learning Foundation, the oldest foundation promoting lifelong learning and democracy and here in Finland. Kansanvalistusseura säätiö on taustani. I work as CEO of the foundation and I have the joy and pleasure to moderate this session with you. You will be able to participate to this session and we will make actually the first part more interactive. So we will first have a quiz, some questions regarding European Citizens Initiative. You have or you will be given a green and red paper in order to answer some of the questions. We will have, I think, altogether 10 questions to you regarding this initiative. But first, I would like to introduce the great panelists today. We are happy to discuss the issue with persons which have a very various and background and also experience regarding the democracy development in Finland and in Europe. And also we have a pleasure to have Charlotte Reeve, policy officer from European Citizens Initiative from European Commission. Charlotte will have the floor in a couple of minutes. And the first, about 30 minutes, we will work together with Charlotte. Then we have Member of Parliament, Nils Torvalds, and he represents Swedish People's Party of Finland. The next gentleman here is Gurman Saini from Eurooppa-nuoret, Vice President. And then Aku Arva, Executive Director, Eurooppalainen Suomi. Before we start the quiz, I would like the panelists to present themselves very shortly, tell about your background and also your relationship to a participatory democracy. Shall Aku start? Please.
Thank you. Hi guys and ladies. I am Aku, like I was introduced, and I work as the Executive Director of European Movement Finland, Eurooppalainen Suomi, and I think our connection to this whole discussion about participatory democracy is about the whole existence of our organization. Our main agenda is to increase discussion about European Union, European policy topics, and that is what we do all around Finland and also internationally through our international network. So for us, this topic is really quite important, but somewhat neglected. And we hope that through this discussion and hopefully the future as well, we'll have a chance to increase people's possibilities to directly influence policies on a European level.
Thank you, Aku. And Gurman, please.
Hello, everybody. It's a lovely day here, and what a great day to talk about participatory things in Europe. And I have one special thing that maybe is a little different from other panelists, is that I was born in European Union. I was born in '97, then we already have a European Union membership. The Finland only was a member state then, and the word participatory is a key word for our organization, because what is the most important thing is to make youth participate in this European Union and other policy-making things. So that's why it's looking forward to a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Kurman. And then Niels, please.
Well, starting with where you are born. Culturally, I'm born between Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You all probably remember that Hiroshima occurred on August the 6th and Nagasaki on August the 9th, and I occurred at August the 7th, 1945. And in some way, I think this has influenced my way of thinking about the world. Culturally speaking, I think I'm, in German terms, I would be called a 68er, because that's the time, 1968, when I started to organize citizens initiatives about a heap of different issues, starting with the Vietnam War and going on with almost anything. Then, if my teachers would be alive, I didn't kill them, so that's not the reason they are not alive. Some of them are. They would be very surprised to see a very problematic child now being a member of the European Parliament, but that's how it sometimes goes.
Okay, thank you, Niels. And then also, Charlotte, you could present yourself and your connection and relationship to participatory democracy. And then we will start your part, please.
So I work as a policy officer in the Secretariat General of the European Commission, in the team in charge of the implementation of the European Citizens Initiative. Have started to work, I've been working on this instrument since its start, so I could follow all the developments around it, and that's it. I can continue directly with the quiz?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, let's start the quiz.
So I'll in fact present you the main features of the instrument through this quiz. And then I'll briefly explain you the new rules, this reform that will apply as of next year, and that will simplify the tool and make it easier to use. But I'll not tell you more right now, because I don't want to reveal the answers to the quiz. So I'll directly start with the first question. So remember, use the green card to reply right and the red card to reply wrong. So, first question. The European Citizens Initiative is a funding program to encourage active citizenship. So, right or wrong? So, sorry, but it's wrong. It's not a funding program. It's a participatory democracy instrument that allows citizens to suggest concrete legal changes in any field where the European Commission has power to propose legislation. So it was introduced by the Lisbon Treaty, so it's quite recent. And we know that the awareness of the tool is still low. And we are trying now through this communication campaign to increase this awareness of this tool. So it was introduced by the Lisbon Treaty, but a regulation was needed to define the rules, the precise rules for the functioning of the instrument. And it started to apply in 2012. So it is now 7 years old. And as I explained, a citizens' initiative is an invitation to the Commission to propose legislation, so it can only be in a field where the Commission has such power. Now, second question. 1 million supporters from an EU country is sufficient for an initiative to be successful, right or wrong? In fact, it's wrong, even if, yes, the total number to be reached is 1 million. But at the same time, so this figure of 1 million is in the treaty, but the treaty also says that signatories, this million of signatories, should come from a significant number of member states. And this number has been set in the regulation. It's 1/4 of member states. So this means that to be successful, an initiative needs to reach 1 million statements of support overall, and some minimum thresholds in at least 7 countries. So the threshold to be counted among the 7 countries is based on the number of members of the European Parliament multiplied by 750. And this means that in Finland, the threshold is 9,750 signatories. Sorry. And the organizers of the initiative have 1 year to reach this number. Third question. It takes 2 to tango, right? But is it the case also for a citizen initiative? There needs to be 2 people to launch an initiative, right or wrong? 2 people. Yes, it's wrong. To launch an initiative, it takes 7 EU citizens living in at least 7 different countries. And those citizens need to be old enough to vote in the European Parliament election. This is to ensure that an initiative has a European nature from the start. And this also means that only citizens can start an initiative, not organizations, even if organizations can support initiatives as long as they do so in full transparency. Question 4. The European Commission can refuse the registration of a European Citizens Initiative. Right or wrong?
Yes. Right.
So this time it's right. So the registration is before any signature is collected. And the Commission can refuse the registration on the basis of some legal criteria, notably if the initiative falls manifestly outside its competences. Also, if an initiative goes against the EU values, the European Commission will reject it. So as I explained, this registration step is before starting the collection phase. Yeah. Then, question 5. Only 20 initiatives have been registered since the tool was launched in 2012. Right or wrong?
Wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong. More than that, 67 initiatives exactly have been registered by the Commission so far since 2012. And we estimate that over 9 million, probably now even more, citizens have supported an initiative since the launch of the instrument. A bit more than 20 were in fact rejected at the registration stage, most of them in the first years, and all of them because they were manifestly outside Commission powers. All the initiatives can be found on the Commission website. And yes, I'd like also to underline that several ones are now in the process of being registered, so I invite you to consult the website to see the list of initiatives. Then question 6. Any citizen residing in the EU can support or launch a European Citizens Initiative. So any citizen residing in the EU can support or launch a European Citizens Initiative. Right or wrong? It's wrong. Not any citizen, only EU nationals can support an initiative. There is a specific form to be used to give support, and depending on the country, signatories have to provide different personal data. Under the current regulation, this is quite complex because the forms are very different, they vary a lot from one country to another. But I will explain later, the new regulation will simplify a lot this aspect. And why do signatories have to provide those data? It's because member states competent authorities verify those signatures at the end of the process, so they need to be able to proceed with this verification on the basis of the personal data provided. Then, question 7. You must be old enough to vote in European elections to support a citizens' initiative. You must be old enough to vote in European elections to support a citizens' initiative. It's right, correct, but this age is not the same everywhere. It's 18 in all countries except in Greece, where it is 17, and in Austria and Malta, where it is 16. Question 8. There are currently more than 10 initiatives open for support. Right or wrong? More than 10 initiatives open for support. That's right. Correct. The exact figure is 17. We have now 17 initiatives open for support on various topics. We have several ones on environment, climate issues, a few ones also on food labeling. One is on housing. We have a few on the rule of law and corruption issues, and so on. So I really invite you to take a look at the Commission dedicated website to see all the details of these initiatives, and of course to find the link where to support those initiatives. Question 9. The Commission is obliged to propose legislation as a result of a successful citizens' initiative. The Commission is obliged to propose legislation as a result of a successful citizens' initiative, right or wrong? So is there an obligation for the Commission to propose legislation? It's wrong. A citizens' initiative, as I explained, as it is defined in the EU treaties, is an invitation to the Commission to propose legislation, so the Commission is not obliged to submit such proposal to the legislator being the European Parliament and the Council in most cases, and in some cases only the Council. However, the Commission always gives careful consideration to all successful initiatives. There is a precise examination procedure to be followed in the regulation. This procedure includes a meeting between the organizers and Commission representatives to give the opportunity to the organizers to explain in detail their initiative, their requests, and the background to their requests. Then there is a public hearing organized in the European Parliament. And finally, the Commission adopts its response in the form of a communication. It must explain which follow-up actions it intends to take, if any, and why. So far, 4 initiatives have reached this stage, and the Commission has taken follow-up measures in reply to 3 out of those 4 initiatives. For 2 of them, a legislative proposal was part of the follow-up actions. One of these proposals has already been adopted recently, in fact, by the Parliament and the Council. The other one is still under discussion. So the one that has already been adopted, so the first EU legislation resulting from a citizens' initiative, is a result of the initiative Ban Glyphosate and Protect People and the Environment from Toxic Pesticides. So the new legislation aims at improving transparency and sustainability of the EU risk assessment in the food chain. The proposals, or the other proposal resulting from a citizens' initiative that is still under discussion, is the result of the initiative Right to Water. It is a revision of the Drinking Water Directive, and according to the Commission proposal, Member States would be obliged to ensure to improve access to water and to ensure access to water for vulnerable and marginalized people. So these are the most concrete results, but many other measures have been of non-legislative nature have been taken by the Commission in reply to these initiatives. I cannot list all of them here, but the full list can be consulted on the Commission website. I just would like to underline that sometimes that legislation is not always the best answer. So other types of measures can also be very meaningful as a reply to initiatives. And sometimes it can be a better option to reach the objectives of an initiative. Sorry, this reply was a bit long, but I think it was important to give a bit more detail. So finally, the last question, an easy one. Have you lent your support to a European Citizens' Initiative before? So have you already signed a Citizens' Initiative? So green for yes, no, red for no. So a few among you have already supported initiatives. Good news. So now we have finished with the quiz, which was a good opportunity to present you the basic features of the tool. But as I explained, new simplified rules will apply as of next year. So I would like to give you a bit more detail about this reform.
Charlotte, before you start the next part, I would like to give you all a big hand, because you all passed the test. At least half of the questions went right. I tried to look at to you. So thanks to all to participate the first part, and then we will go in depth to this initiative and start the discussion. So, but first, yes, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have any separate certificates to give you, but maybe later, maybe next time then. But yes, let's continue.
Okay, so this is just a recap about the results of the instrument so far. So since 2012, 95 requests for registration were submitted. Among them, around 70, almost 70 were registered. 4 were successful in their collection. And we estimate that around 9 million citizens have already supported an initiative. And as I said, 3 out of 4 successful initiatives have been subject to follow-up actions. So why a reform? As I said earlier, quite a lot of initiatives could not be registered during the first years of the instrument mainly. So this first step, this registration step, was already an obstacle for organizers. Then the process of collecting signatures and then the verification by member states was is currently quite complex and burdensome for the organizers. And the final examination procedure was not seen as inclusive enough. And finally, we have also observed that there is a low awareness about the tool among citizens. So these were the main issues that were identified with the rules and that justified the need for a revision of those rules. So what was the process to reform those rules? It started in 2015 with the Commission report on the implementation of the regulation. This report already highlighted the main challenges encountered by organizers. Then 3 studies were launched in 2016 to best inform the Commission decisions. In 2017, the decision was made to launch the revision, and this was followed by an open public consultation, which received more than 5,000 replies, mainly from citizens. The Commission then adopted a proposal in September 2017, which was discussed with the Parliament and Council until an agreement was reached at the end of 2018, so that the new rules will apply, as I said, as of 2020 next year. Sorry, didn't work. So here you can see the main steps, successive steps of an initiative, those steps are not modified with the new rules, but adjustments are made in each of them to facilitate the process. So the first step is the group of organizers. The second step is the registration with the Commission. The third step is the collection of statements of support, of signatures. The fourth one is the verification of those statements of support by member state competent authorities. And the fifth one is the examination procedure by the Commission. So starting with the first one, the group of organizers. So it will still be a group of 7 citizens coming from 7 member states, but there will be the possibility for organizers to set up a legal entity in a member state. And there will be more assistance and information to the groups of organizers. There will be an online collaborative platform and national contact points to provide information and advice. The online collaborative platform, it in fact already exists. It started last year as a pilot project, and it will be pursued under new regulation. It offers plenty of resources for organizers to help them setting up their initiative, and there is a space for discussions, for open discussions. And there is also a help desk service, which offers customized advice to organizers or potential organizers on legal issues, for example, on whether a potential initiative is within the Commission powers. But it can be also on campaigning matters or fundraising matters. So this platform is managed by a consortium of organizations under contract with the Commission. So in fact, support is provided by independent experts. For the registration step, there will be the possibility of a 2-stage procedure in case the proposed initiative falls entirely or partly outside the Commission competencies. So this will allow the organizers to revise their proposal based on the first feedback from the Commission. And if after this revision the initiative still falls partly outside the Commission powers, there will be the possibility of partial registration. And the Commission will also provide translation of the content, of the main content of the initiatives in all EU languages. The collection process will be much simplified. There will be, as of next year, only 2 possible forms. Depending on the country, it will be either the name, date of birth, and address to be provided by signatories, or the name and ID number. In Finland, it will be the name, date of birth, and address. Then member states will have the possibility to lower the age of support to 16. So far, most member states have not yet decided, and Finland is among them. Organizers will choose the starting date of the collection period within 6 months of the registration. This will allow them to get prepared before the 1-year period starts. And the online collection will be much easier. Today, the online collection system is the responsibility of the organizers. They have to set up their system and get it certified by the competent authority in the member state where the data will be stored. This has created a lot of difficulties for organizers. The Commission now already provides systems, but it's still the responsibility of the organizers, and the certification is still needed. As of next year, there will be a central online collection system ready to use without the need to get a certification. So this will really make it easier. Individual systems will still be possible, but only until the end of 2022. The verification of the statement of support will be made easier through the use of IT tools. In particular, the Commission will offer a transfer service. So organizers will be able to use this service to submit the statements of support to the national authorities for verification. Finally, as regards the examination, this phase will be extended. It will last 6 months instead of 3 today, in order to be more inclusive. And signatories will also be informed about the follow-up actions taken by the Commission. Of course, if they have left their email address for that purpose. So the objectives of this reform is really to make the tool more citizen-friendly, more accessible, and the rules will be much simpler. So we really hope that this will encourage more people to participate by supporting initiatives, but also by organizing initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Charlotte. And also, ladies and gentlemen, you are also invited to join the following discussion with the panelists. So you are able to ask questions, and there will be a microphone also available. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand so we can then give the floor to you. And also, we invite you to tweet. There is some hashtags also on this Turku event. So if you tweet, we can also raise some of the questions from the tweets to the panelists. So we will start the discussion part, and as we know now technically how to go on if we would like to be active towards the European Union decision making. So I would like to take the first theme and the Finnish perspective on participatory democracy. In Finland, we have some platforms, some tools to our citizens to be active and to affect the decision-making on the local and also on the governmental level. So how would you, as expert on democracy and having perspective from different backgrounds, youth, from the European Union perspective, also how, for example, Nils looks look at Finland today, and also Aku from the long experience on promoting democracy. So how would you describe the situation today in Finland? How is the situation on participatory democracy today? And if you have any examples or experience on the tools we have here in Finland, you could also raise the tool or instrument also to the discussion. And if, Niels, if you could start.
I think we have to go back to 1980s, end of 1970s, beginning of 1980s, when not just Finland, I think a couple of other nations understood that we have some sort of, to use Jürgen Habermas' phrase, democratic shortcomings. And therefore, when Finland rewrote the constitution, at that time, we introduced also the idea of citizens' initiatives and referendums. And that discussion was probably a very optimistic one, because now we see what can happen with referenda. You put a question to people, sometimes a very complicated question, and they tend to say yes or no, and the result can be as catastrophic as the British referendum. So therefore, I think we have today a slightly more pessimistic view about citizens' initiatives and referenda, how they actually work. So I think basically we have to find new solutions, better working solutions. And the problem with this kind of democracy is that it's organized from above. When I started this presentation, I said that I'm a 68er. We did this all by ourselves, and I still prefer that civil society organizations do it by themselves and not through a state organization. And I think that goes for the European Union also.
Okay, thank you. How about then if we take the younger generation and the point of view of youngsters in Europe and especially in Finland, how would you describe the situation today?
I think that the important thing that we have to notice in this date is that we have the social media. When we have the initiative, anybody can launch that, and it can spread so fast and reach other same-minded people. You don't anymore need to walk around in the squares or the streets of the different cities to gather names. It's basically enough that you just post on Facebook, on some Facebook group, and you suddenly get so many names. And that's actually one initiative that came to my mind is about the diesel car tax. I think it was in just one day, it gathered maybe over 70,000 names because they just posted on some Facebook group, and then people realized, okay, we want to get rid of the diesel tax. So in the era of the social media, it's not just youth, but everybody can, it's more participatory than it was before. And other point that I would like to bring up is the educational part. I remember it was like more closest to my high school times that other panelists I could say, is that we were taught that there are elections, you can be a candidate or you can vote, and there was always the third option. It was the citizens' initiative. And there's like programmed in the educational system that there's always this option for this. And I think the youth are using the option very nicely now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And how about Aku?
Yeah, I think another good example of how the citizens' initiative works in Finland was the discussion about the Saimaa seals. They started dying because of a certain method of fishing, and it took under a day to get the names to ban these types of fishing. So it can have an impact, even if it doesn't end up being new legislation or if it doesn't really change much. It can raise topics on general discussion, and it can give people kind of a feeling that they can influence. They can directly influence on policy topics, and I think that is what is most valuable of these initiatives. I think I kind of agree with Niels here that there are some issues with these yes and no questions. They tend to polarize discussions, and they can end up in some weird results. But all in all, I think in Finland at least, and we haven't had this form of citizens' initiatives that long. And the very first successful one that actually changed legislation, I think, was Tahdon 2013 campaign about equal marriage rights. And I'm still waiting on the EU level. I'm waiting this some sort of an initiative that will really bring together all Europeans cross borders and really, go through in media as well. I think there was 4 of these initiatives that have gone through now. I think one of them was to ban abortions or something. So again, the quality of the initiatives and how they affect and how they engage people is very important.
How do you see it then, if with as you discussed, the direct kind of effect or the willingness to directly influence the decision making? What is the role of political parties or then think about associations in this perspective? If there is this direct route to affect, and then there are coalitions or communities. So how do you see that?
Well, if I start from the NGO perspective, I think on a Finnish level, when this whole citizens' initiative started first, there were a lot of NGOs behind them, either openly or kind of less openly. And that goes also for the political parties. A lot of these initiatives were started by activists from different political parties. And I think that's something that will also be something that will happen on the European level with the European Citizens Initiative. NGOs like European Movement should probably be promoting or be behind some of these initiatives. We don't want it to become a lobbying tool. We have, I think, enough lobbyists in Brussels already and in Finland as well. But to get past the threshold of visibility and attention in people's minds, we most likely need NGOs and different organizations to give them the initial push. Unless there are topics which are really current and in everyone's minds immediately, then they might just live on their own.
Okay, yeah. And Nils, you have...
I think the central issue is actually something you could call the vibrancy of civil society. If you have a vibrant civil society, then society will work. If you need some negative example of societies that don't work, then you can just go to our eastern neighbor, where you have a very weak or non-existent civil society, and therefore the democratic process is sort of locked in a very dangerous way, actually. So the central question is about the vibrancy of civil society. But as soon as we speak about civil society, we should probably also be able to make a difference between real civil societies and electronic civil societies, because electronic civil societies, they can, as Aku already said, they pop up in seconds flat on one issue. The issue might be very sort of, or the question might be very put in a very awkward or wrong way, but it takes fire, and then all of a sudden we have a great amount of people saying, well, do this and do that. Therefore, electronic societies and platforms are in a way dangerous for a vibrant civil society. And I can give you one example. In the very first part of the last mandate of the European Parliament, the Commission came out with a proposal or a public consultation about the Birds Directive. And they got about 100,000 answers, of which 99,000 just answered the first question. Do you want to reform the Birds Directive or no? And they said no. And that was organized by platforms of organizations. So platforms are actually sometimes killing the real discussion, because you tend to give an impression that this is supported by anybody. So the question of the civil society, is it a vibrant, real face-to-face civil society, or is it something which is up there in the electronic world?
Okay, and Kurma, please.
And I think the role of the NGOs is quite important, like Aku said, because for two individual person who are not politically that active, but who want to make the impact on legislative, it's very hard, first of all, to gather so many people, first to even start the initiative. And then, of course, thanks to the reform, it seems like a little bit easier after that. But NGOs have the power. NGOs can, first of all, they are not that much of interested in just one political agenda or party political agenda. They are interested in like a general way. For example, our organization is generally interested in European Union and the questions related to that. Plus, many of their NGOs are internationally. They have for example, a German branch, and they have a Switzerland branch, or they have branches in other countries. So it's more easier to NGOs to gather the names than to individual peoples to gather the names. So I think the NGOs have the key role here.
Okay, if we then think about the current situation also from the point of view of education, how do you think, or what is your experience on Finnish education or Finnish schools, how they could promote the idea that we all can affect the decision making either directly or either through parties or communities? What is the current situation from your experience? Or thinking about your time in the school, did you get any kind of
It's so far back I don't remember.
possibilities to affect the school decision making or the community? Yes, Kurman first and then Nils.
I think that just the classes on how EU works is not enough, because like in Finland we have this one how we call it, yhteiskuntaoppi, how social science or something we could translate it, that teaches, there's one course that teaches something about the EU or just only institutions. And I can remember 3 years back when I was in high school that it was only that, hey, you just remember all the institutions and then you pass the test. That's all. But it was not that deep. I think we need to get more deeper how the EU legislative works and how it affects on the national levels. And then we get the deeper understanding of why should we even consider doing some initiatives or something like that. And I can say from my behalf that I learned more about EU being part of the Eurooppa-nuoret than sitting in a school bench. And that's why I think that student councils, youth organizations, they have a very key role in this to promote the, how you got political activeness.
Yeah, very good. And then Nils.
Well, during my 7 years in the European Parliament, I had actually visited a lot of schools. And the schools are very, very different. I have enormously good experiences from Tapiolan yhteiskoulu, which is a sort of high-end school, where they have very interested and very well-educated teachers. So the role of the teacher is, again, crucial, of course. And then if you go to a school with less resources, less cultural resources, less initiatives for the teachers, then you end up with something very different. So what we would actually need is more possibilities, and this goes back to, for instance, Erasmus Plus programs. We should give the teachers of these social sciences classes in high school a possibility to use Erasmus Plus for their further education, because that would give them an initiative to do something. They would get something for themselves out of being more active teachers in this field, and that would probably also slightly reduce the difference between the high-end schools and the low-end schools in different parts of Finland.
Yes, and Aku, please.
And to add to this good speech, I would still say that the bigger issue is not, let's say, the qualities between high schools. I think the bigger issue is between high schools and polytechnics, toinen aste from the ammatillinen puoli. Yeah. And the same issue goes with universities and universities of applied sciences in Finland. The other has a lot of topics and discussion and education about civil society, politics, whatnot. And the other is focused on more practical matters, and it creates a situation where we have people who have a lot of abilities to be politically active, and then we have a big group of people, half of the people who are not, or who don't have the the initial chance to understand and learn more about these topics. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we need to fix in Finland. Yeah. But now, about Finland, I don't think we have, like you said, we don't have a big issue here. Like, okay, well, there's something we can tweak, something we can do better. But the biggest issue on an European level are definitely the countries that don't have a strong civil society. And that EU should focus on helping these countries especially. I think here it's mostly about awareness. But we have countries that don't really have this background, background of NGOs, background of civil society activism, and that's an issue.
Okay, we will continue very shortly. I would like to ask the audience if you still have the green paper. I would like very quickly about if you know the following tools we have in Finland for the citizens initiative or activity. So kansalaisaloite first. How many of you know?
Kortti pystyyn.
Quite many, yes. Then nuorten ideat. Nuorten ideat, okay. Ota kantaa. Some of you, almost the same persons know every instrument. And lausuntopalvelu also. Okay, there are quite many of these tools and instruments. So it should be so that we Finns have the possibility to make initiatives and also to participate. But I would like to continue to discuss on from the individual perspective. What is the role, or what should be the role of us as citizens to activate our friends, families, children, and so on? What could we do? Just remembering the news yesterday when Greta Thunberg reached the harbor in New York and will participate in the climate change forum, and so that's one of kind of extreme example of active citizen. So how do you see what is the situation in Finland? Do we as parents remember that we should also discuss these topics in the families with our friends and communities? So how do you see it? What is the role of an individual? First, maybe Nils, if you start.
Well, I think you could actually start by saying repetitia est mater studiorum. You have to repeat, repeat. And I've actually done it in an interesting way. During all the campaigns, I've gone to service stations, gas stations, where the guys from the village are sitting. And the first time I came, they were sort of, stay away, we don't listen to you. Probably 3 were sort of probably listening. And I came back, and I did it again before the elections in May. And all of a sudden, after repeating what I had been saying for 10 years, they were, for the first time, really actively listening. So it's for politicians, it's a question of getting the confidence, and you don't get the confidence the first time you go there. You have to show that you are sincere in what you do, and the only way of doing and showing that you are sincere is to come back and come back and come back.
Okay, how about Kurma?
I think that many of us are not like, we have this, sometimes the culture called that politics does not affect me. that it's something there in the parliament house, it's something there in the politicians do, but it doesn't affect me and I don't care about politics. These are the lines that I usually hear from my friends who are not active in the NGOs or like that. But I like to tell them many times that everything affects, everything that, like what happens in politics, sooner or later affects you by the legislation or by some other things. So I think that it's so important to be active, but we can't expect everyone to be active if they don't care about it. So I just remember that once we were with Aku in one vocational school in Vantaa, Varja, and then the students came to listen about the EU, but then sooner we noticed that they don't care about if we talk about some theoretical part. So we started to ask, okay, what are you studying? And they started, okay, I want to be a cook and I want to be this and that. Then we connected the EU to that. Okay, you want to be a cook, you're a chef, then you know that EU regulates that we have a good food here. Yes, then he gets interested in EU. So we need to get it closer. We sometimes say the EU is somewhere there in Brussels. It's not. It's here, right here. And we need to feel it. We need to understand it. You remember that, Aku?
Yes, I do. Yeah, thanks for stealing my example, dude. I have to come up with a new one. Well, actually, I would like to speak, at least comment on about the responsibility of the individual as well, because we toured 21 cities in Finland last spring because of the elections. We wanted to remind people that the EU elections are coming. You need to go and vote, and the politician here as well toured with us and probably remembers a lot of people, a lot of meetings in different markets, and so many people, at least to us, came and told, "Oh, I'm not going to vote. I don't really care." And there has to be some, individual responsibility to be active in some way, and the bare minimum is to vote. Obviously, this is something that the politicians can say, but as an NGO leader, I'm definitely saying this, that there has to be some individual responsibility. And one way for us to, make it happen is to create these tools. There are several in Finland. There are now at least one functional in the European level, and then we need to raise awareness and make them, as engaging as we can. But then again, in the end, it is the responsibility of the individual to become active somehow. We just need to make the first step as low as possible for them.
Yeah. Maybe at this stage, I would like to ask a kind of point of view or comment from Charlotte. How do you feel this discussion, the Finnish situation? You have seen many European countries as you have made round tours on European Citizens Initiative. So how does this discussion sounds like?
I think it's really interesting, and I think the Finnish case is really interesting for us because there are several tools and people are aware of those tools in Finland. And maybe I have one question for the audience. How have they heard about those tools in Finland? How have they been made aware of the existence of those tools?
That's very good. I think we can then jump to the next topic because that's about how to make and raise the awareness of the tools and instruments, and what has been the secret in Finland, how this promotion has happened, because there are activities on these platforms also. I just started to memorize my childhood, and I just remember when in Finland there was the parliamentary voting day, so it was a kind of big day in our family. My parents wanted the children to come to the voting place, and they said this is a very important day, so you need to remember that that's your way to make your kind of part to the society. So maybe we should also somehow celebrate these platforms and instruments. So maybe that would be one of the ways, but I have not seen that kind of events yet. Maybe next time we will have this kind of discussion. It will be a kind of celebration of the first great initiatives for the European Citizens Initiative from Finland. So yes, maybe we jump to the next topic, and let's discuss a bit about the Finnish instrument, the Finnish Citizens Initiative, and also European Citizens Initiative. Are there any kind of, as you have now heard about the process and the technicalities and how the Europeans could affect. How do you see, are there any similarities and or differences between Finnish tools and this European tool? And then we will continue to discuss on how these tools could be more closer together from the citizens' point of view. But let's start about your experience or ideas.
Sorry, I think someone wants to contribute in the audience. I think you wanted to say something.
Jouko haluaa esittää kysymyksen.
Yeah, let's take the question.
Yeah, I'm Jouko Hemmi from Turku. Thank you very much for the nice discussions. I had a question to this issue on how to activate people to participate in society's issues. And in my opinion, it's here in this very point is question of democracy actually. How this very important word democracy functions, how it works as the maybe most influential function. I mean, if democracy doesn't work, how can you activate people? They go together, they are dependent on each other. So I have a personal answer to this question, and it concerns the democracy in Iceland. There is a discussion on how to develop democracy in this little island country. There is arose a question how to remove the buffer between people, civil society and the parliament. I heard from my friends in Iceland that they are aiming at remove politicians between parliament and the civil society. They want to directly vote ministers to the parliament. So they claim that this could be a good solution to enhance the impact of civil society on parliament issues to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment and the kind of discussion which is going on. What is the role of democracy and how to make the parliamentary coalitions and how the setting will be. There will be interesting future, most likely, to all of us. So, any comments for this audience question? Oops.
I can start. I'll try to start. I think the biggest difference when we speak about civil society is actually, if we take the Finnish examples, that we still have a fairly well-functioning civil society. If you go back to my childhood, then you would have in any village, you would have at least 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different organizations, sometimes competing with each other. And that sort of, you had the political discussions, you had the sports organization, you had the local school there as a cultural center, and that function. What we see today is people being sort of absorbed by different activities. And in some parts of Finland, some part of the civil society is actually in a very critical stage because you don't have young people there, you don't have the cultural resources you would need, and therefore it doesn't function. But if you compare the Finnish civil society today with almost any civil society, including the American one and Mr. Trump, then I said we are still in a fairly good shape. And as a direct answer to Jouko, a system where you would choose your minister by a system which an antique Athens was called Ostrog, I think, is not a very good system. It's actually very undemocratic and could be misused heavily. So I hope they won't accept that form of non-democracy. But we have discussed this with Jouko before, I think.
And you can continue after this
Yes.
also, of course. Any comments from Gurman or Aku? Okay. So let's take the topic as we started already. So any differences you see on the process or these initiatives from thinking about Finnish Citizens Initiative and European Citizens Initiative? Yes, Aku.
Well, obviously, I'm not a deep expert on the European level of the Citizens Initiative, but I was comparing, before this discussion, I was comparing the initiatives that have been made, have been successful, have been launched and have had enough signatures. And I think the biggest difference here is that the quality of the initiatives in Finland is higher than on the European level. And many of these Finnish citizens' initiatives are actually direct suggestions on how to change specific legislation. So I think that is one of the
practical,
key differences here. I think the second one is that there's a huge political and kind of social media or social pressure to go through these successful initiatives in Finland by the lawmakers, the politicians. So they have to really evaluate and they have to give a public statement on why they perhaps will not accept the suggestion or why they won't go make a new law based on them. And it's covered more in Finland in many occasions. I really haven't seen, at least in Finland, I haven't seen many news headlines about the European initiatives being dumped out or being successful. I can't recall a single one, and I actually tried Googling and I couldn't find a single headline about the European Citizens Initiative that would have been successful. But I think the biggest thing is about the quality of preparations. In Finland, I think it's better.
Okay. Yes, Gurman.
Actually, I agree with Aku because then you could see and you go and see, it's more like an opinion that is posted on the ECIs. Okay, I have this opinion, I gather with this, I want somebody to do something with it. But the Finnish initiatives, they have more like of this, that we have made everything ready for you, dear politicians, you just accept it, just copy-paste this thing and we're happy with that. And that's why it matters. It's not you may see that, okay, the Finnish quality is higher, but it matters a lot. It matters a lot. It's easier. The half job is done there.
And just to quickly continue on this, I think that the most important factor here is that it is a bit more binding for the politicians. Now, a few of these European citizens' initiatives that have been successful have resulted in some sort of a hearing or a seminar or some debates. And in Finland, they have become legislation, direct legislation, very impactful legislation. I think one of the main things behind the whole idea of citizens' initiative is the possibility to directly affect policy making. And I think it's still a bit lacking in the European level. At least the results, I haven't seen them.
Okay. Yes.
I realize that I'm starting to be more and more skeptical. There's a very interesting discussion going on in Germany for the moment being, who is owning democracy and in what way? And that's actually, that discussion started with the Alternative für Deutschland coming on the scene, where they said that if democracy does something from their point of view which is wrong, then you are allowed to change it. And that actually is going to the value issue. And I think we have to define what kind of values democracy can defend and what kind of values democracy can't defend. And this will be a very complicated discussion.
Yes.
Just to continue on here, I think you're spot on here, because there's also a risk that, let's say that we have a situation where we have far-right political party in charge of a certain country, and then they get the citizens' initiative supporting some really, some policy that's really like not good, and they use it as a leverage to change, the constitution or whatever, because that is the wish of the people. And there are some risks behind these, and that's why we really need a strong value base, the European value base, and we need to really defend it and make sure that these systems that we implement, these tools for direct democracy, which I think we really need, but they have to be fail-safe, so that we're not in a situation where they enable dictatorship, for example.
Yeah, you raised a very important aspect. First, we discussed that the democracy is the base for the citizens' initiative, and then there are also challenges in the today's democracy, and the development is not always positive. So the values are the foundation for the citizens' initiative in a way. Maybe we continue on also remembering this part, that there should be the value-based, there should be a strong democracy, then there are tools for the citizens' initiative. How do you see these instruments, these Finnish instruments and European citizens' initiative? Could this create a kind of path for the decision-making? First starting a kind of topics in different municipalities or cities in Europe and in Finland, raising the same themes, for example, solving some problems, for example, of urbanization as a very strong challenge in the world today, and then raising the initiative level to citizens' initiative, to the governmental level in different countries, and then the European level. Is that kind of development, can it be a kind of one way how these instruments create a strong pool to also to make a better Europe, and also to bring something to the local level, and also then make the values even stronger? Is that only a kind of utopia or kind of vision which cannot be true, or could that be a kind of way to promote these instruments? How do you see it?
Well, I've been co-chair of the minority intergroup in the parliament, and the minority intergroup in the parliament was partly in charge of a citizens' initiative, the Minority Safe Pack. And saying that, I would like to stress that we have in every European country we have minorities, and in almost all of the minorities are ill-treated. So therefore we started together with FUEN to organize the Minority Safe Pack. And in 1913, the Commission didn't or refused to register this initiative. And we went to court, and the Commission lost. So, and from my point of view, it is very problematic, because if you listen to Charlotte in the very beginning, in the rules we say that if it's manifestly against the rules of the European Union, then the Commission is not obliged to register it. But the Commission is a very political organ, and therefore when we picked a very touchy issue about minorities, this institution, the Commission, just said no. We had a very unpleasant discussion with a lawyer from the Commission who came to our meeting to explain why, and I had, as a chair, I had to tell him that he sounded like a Prussian formalist from the 19th century, which is sometimes the approach of civil servants in the Commission. So I think the idea of a European citizens' initiative was a very nice one, and I think the Commission screwed it heavily, really heavily. they have lost at least 2 times in the Court of Justice because of their sort of, in my mind, very undemocratic, very selfish approach to real European problems. And if citizens' initiatives aren't allowed to take up problematic issues in the European Union, so what the hell are we doing with citizen initiative? And the new rules doesn't actually change this issue, because you still have sort of the political decision in the Commission in the background, and I find it really, really problematic.
Okay, Gudman, you have.
If I may maybe
yes,
reply on this specific case, to explain a little bit the background, just to explain that, yes, it's the Commission who takes the decision on registration, but it is at that stage, a purely legal decision. It does not assess the opportunity, the political opportunity of the initiative right at the beginning. So it has to assess whether the legal criteria set out in the regulation are fulfilled or not.
So why did you lose in the Court of Justice?
Well, let me explain.
Because you were wrong.
In the case of Minority Safe Pack, it was a pack, so there were a list of different proposals, and some of them were not within the Commission competencies. So that's why it was the registration was refused, because the current regulation does not allow, does not foresee to partially register an initiative. Following the court case, and I mean, it's what the Juncker Commission tried to do is to have a more citizen-friendly approach to this registration phase. And since for a few years already, now the Commission accepts already partial registration. So that's why that Minority Safe Pack initiative was registered after the court case, with the explanation that in the Commission decision that some of the proposals are not within the Commission competencies.
Okay.
But that's not the only case where you have lost in court. You have some other cases, and they are also related to very touchy, politically very touchy issues in the European Union.
But that's why we have the Court of Justice, that organizers can indeed go to court to contest the Commission, the legal interpretation of the Commission, and it's true that in at least in other cases, the Commission interpretation was deemed not correct by the court. When the Commission has taken the Commission has taken the measures to correct that and has registered the initiative in question.
Okay, maybe we'll take Gurman's
Thank you.
aspect.
I think that when we start to promote something big, we need to understand that it needs to be practical for the citizen, for the individual who is not politically active. And we just talked with, like before, that in Finland the quality is higher, it's more technical, but the other ECIs, they're more like desires to be fulfilled, and they are okay, because you can't expect an individual or a community that wants to make a change in the legislative to be experts in that, because when you expect that, then that also becomes a question of the how do you have the income to buy a lawyer to see that this thing is okay, and then we pass that. Like that, but this comes to mind in one initiative in Finland. It was the maksuton toinen aste, like free, like how we call that, high school and vocational teaching. That was an initiative that was led by the NGOs, the student unions, and it gathered the 50,000 names. It went to the parliament and the groups, valiokunta, what you call that?
Committees.
Yeah. And there it did not pass due to some little technical issues. And this was told, and it was so frustrating. Imagine student unions, people, like some of them are underage, and they are doing the work, they're doing the marketing, they're everything to get this successful. They gather 50,000 names, take it to the parliament, and then they say, oh, a little technical issue, tore it, cancelled, bye-bye. No discussion. So this is not encouraging at all. And we need to look for these things. Is it A, encouraging? B, is it easy for an individual to do it? I mean, it shouldn't be that easy that everybody makes an initiative every second day and it's all about trolling. But is it is it easy for an individual to adapt that tool? Because we call it a tool, and it should be easier also.
Yes, Aku.
And to your original question about if we could create a kind of a step or platform out of these, municipal and national and EU level tools, definitely. And as a strong supporter of integration, I think this would be lovely. And you make them identical to each European country, and you make them kind of a requirement for continuing staying a member, for example. I think it will be an interesting tool, and it will give really useful data for us to compare the quality and the kind of functionality of their civil societies in different countries if we would actually have this system. Why not? But to continue from what Guru just said, I think the impactfulness is one of the key things that made the Finnish Citizens Initiative actually something that everyone recognizes. The fact that it made an impact in society, it changed the major law, it brought, it made same-sex marriages possible in Finland. That's a huge impact on a very hot topic. And when we see something like this on the European level, I think then the European Citizens Initiative will actually start working as well. It will break, the barriers, and it will become widely recognized. But that means that when these initiatives are made, they really need to be, dealt with properly and not buried. I'm not saying that happens, but I'm just saying that there's a risk, like Guru said with the second or the Students' Initiative about free education. There's always a risk that it's going to be buried, and then it's going to really let people down.
Yes, we have now heard that the Citizens' Initiative may have a strong impact, but there might be challenges also on the process or on the bureaucracy or technical challenges. So I would turn to the final part of our panel and discuss the future of parliamentary democracy. We have already touched the issue from several points of view, but I would like to give the kind of final word for you, including also Charlotte, if you would like to join the discussion also. How do you see it? Is this the step today, as we have seen that we have different tools? In Finland, the situation is already quite active, but there's a lot to do still in order to raise the awareness and activity. But maybe the same situation in Europe also. And if we look for the future of Europe and Finland, and seeing the challenges we face on democracy, on those grand challenges, climate change and urbanization, digitalization, and these big issues we need to solve. How do you see it? What is the role of this parliamentary democracy in the future, and how would you visionarize the future?
I think we have a great challenge just for the moment being. In the parliament, the take actually was that by launching the process of Spitzenkandidaten, we could in small steps create for the first functional European parties. This time, I think if you look at the process with some kind of critical eyes, I think the parliament did something almost catastrophic, because in the beginning we had accepted the process of Spitzenkandidaten, and then all of a sudden your Spitzenkandidaten wasn't good enough. So we actually tore the process apart, and now we don't know if the Spitzenkandidaten idea is alive at all, which is going to create problems for us in the future. In the long run, we need, and that goes back to Habermas again, we need a European civil society. But we can't create a European civil society without European parties. And therefore, I have been forced to rethink some of my presumptions. I think we need transnational lists in the next European election, because that's probably the only way of starting in small steps to create something which could be a European civil society. I say small steps because just the political part of a European civil society isn't good enough. We need other forms of civil society organizations around that, but they should be European, and they should be able to have a European dialogue, which this probably is a part of.
Started already. Okay, thank you, Nils. And maybe we take Aku next.
Yeah, difficult to estimate what will happen in the future, but definitely, like Nils just said, we have issues at the moment. And for me, this whole Spitzenkandidat process, and especially how it ended, was a disgrace. And it was an insult for people who actually went and voted in the election. I mean, it's not a high figure that said that they vote specifically because of the Spitzenkandidat, they vote in a certain way because of them, but it was still several % of the people who voted, they thought about the process. And the way it ended, I think, and you can say whatever about if you want to have this process or not, but we made the decision. We should have respected it. Yeah. And now it was up to the national, the different EU members who failed us in this, and I'm disappointed. But we need to create some sort of a solution here, which will, make the European level democracy stronger and more visible, and the whole EU parties more visible in each member state. If it's not the Spitzenkandidat process, it has to be something else. The Parliament is the only, democratically chosen, institution in EU. I would like to see some more, definitely. So hopefully we will find a tool that fits also the desires and the power-hungry people in the national, on the national level.
Okay, thank you, Aku. And maybe at this stage, Charlotte, and then we will turn to the younger generation, which has the future and hopefully also good visions for us. Okay, please, Charlotte.
Coming back to participatory democracy, I think the need to involve citizens in policy making is now high on the political agenda and of the Commission, and I think this will continue to be the case in the future. The European Citizens Initiative is one of the tools to involve citizens, but it's not the only one. There are also the citizens' dialogues organized by the Commission. There is an important consultation policy, stakeholder consultation policy put in place by the Commission. So I think it's really important, and it will continue to be. We really want citizens to participate, to make their voice heard, and to make use of the tools made available for them.
Thank you, Charlotte. And then Kurma.
I think that when we discuss about the future of democracy, we need to understand what are the issues that right now are troubling the democracy. And the one big issue that I'm most afraid of is that, for example, when the Spitzenkandidat thing did not go through, is when an individual citizen thinks, does my vote really matter or not? This is when we can, like from the NGO perspective, from the government or the party perspective, we can encourage people to vote and this and that. But if it doesn't make an impact, then the individual starts to think, does it matter at all? There are countries in the EU that are not even like following the rule of law technically, and then others are obliged to follow that, and it's a good thing. But the individual still has his or her concerns, that what should we do with the problem itself? And when we come to the younger generation, we are not just the future, we are here already, and we are here, we have opinions, and we have also even some young democratically elected people that is wonderful in these elections. But we need to just expand it to youth. If we think that youth are the future, we need to hear the youth. We can always lower the voting age in every member state. We can do some more democratically elected institutions for young people also. If we see that as a problem that the young people are not visible enough talking about the things, we can have the better dialogue with the young organizations like European Youth Forum or Young European Federalists in the European level, that they're really about to make the effect on the policies. So these are the things, but we do have to remember wherever we are that the youth are not there somewhere when you fast forward this year to 100 years back to future. We are already here. You can ask us. Because the Brexit, it is not a EU panel about the Brexit if you don't mention Brexit. The Brexit has it the other way. They did not hear the youth. And see what happened. The youth are the ones who are going to get the difficulties of that because they want to stay in the European Union. So let's not make a false agenda about let's hear the youth. Let's really hear the youth and let them also talk and influence. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all of our panelists for your excellent word regarding the democracy and also regarding your experience and your ability to visionarize also the future. We have heard that we need values, we need democracy in behind, and we need these tools, and we need also all of us also to participate and to be active. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this Europe in the future. So we have used our time. I thank you all sharing the views with us and hope you have got some more inspiring ideas for the future, how we could make a better Europe together, using also these tools and especially this European Citizens Initiative. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good talk. Kiitos.
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 Merci.
Kiitos.